Welcome to Volume and Vision. What if everything you've been told about success was only half the truth? Since childhood, we've heard the same advice over and over again. Work harder, stay busy, put in more hours than everyone else, and one day success will surely follow. It sounds reasonable, doesn't it? After all, effort is important. But if effort alone guaranteed success, then the hardest working people in the world would also be the wealthiest, happiest, and most fulfilled. Yet that's not what we see. There are people who seem to accomplish incredible things without constantly feeling exhausted. They build successful businesses, master valuable skills, enjoy meaningful relationships, and still have time to pursue hobbies and spend time with family. On the other hand, millions of people work tirelessly every single day, constantly feeling overwhelmed, yet never seem to move closer to the life they dream about. So what separates these two groups? Is it intelligence? Is it talent? Is it luck? Richard Koch, in his best-selling book The 80/20 Principle, argues that the answer is something much simpler, yet far more powerful. The difference isn't that successful people do more. The difference is that they do the right things. Today's journey is about one idea that has transformed businesses, careers, relationships, and personal lives around the world. It's an idea so simple that most people overlook it, yet so powerful that once you truly understand it, you'll never look at your time, your work, or your priorities the same way again. So settle in, because over the next few minutes, you're not just listening to a book summary. You're about to discover a completely different way of thinking about success. And if you find value in today's video, don't forget to subscribe to Volume and Vision, where every book has the potential to change the way you see the world. Now, let's begin. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning with two choices. In the first option, you're given a list of 100 different tasks. Every task looks equally important. You try your best to complete all of them. You rush from one activity to another, barely taking a break. By the end of the day, you're exhausted. You feel busy, but strangely, nothing significant has changed. In the second option, you're given only 5 tasks. They don't seem urgent. In fact, they look almost too simple. But completing those 5 tasks brings more progress than finishing the other 95 combined. Which option would you choose? The answer is obvious. Yet every day, most of us unknowingly choose the first option. Our lives become crowded with emails, meetings, notifications, endless scrolling, unnecessary obligations, and countless tiny decisions that consume our attention. We confuse movement with progress. We mistake busyness for productivity. We proudly tell ourselves we're working hard, while the truly important work remains untouched. This is the trap that Richard Koch wants us to escape. The foundation of this book is built on a remarkable observation that has appeared in nature, economics, business, science, and everyday life for over a century. A small number of causes are responsible for the majority of results. This idea is commonly known as the 80/20 principle. The numbers themselves aren't magical. They aren't fixed mathematical laws. Sometimes the ratio may be 70/30, sometimes 90/10, sometimes even 95/5. The exact numbers don't matter. The pattern does. In almost every area of life, a surprisingly small number of actions produce most of the outcomes. Think about a fruit orchard. Hundreds of trees may grow there, but only a handful consistently produce the sweetest fruit and the largest harvest. A wise farmer doesn't divide his attention equally among every tree. He identifies the healthiest ones, cares for them exceptionally well, and enjoys far greater rewards. Life works exactly the same way. A few habits shape most of your future. A few relationships influence most of your happiness. A few decisions determine most of your success. A few mistakes create most of your problems. Once you begin noticing this pattern, you realize something surprising. Your biggest challenge isn't finding more time. It's discovering where your time actually matters. Let's consider a simple example. Imagine 2 friends, Ethan and Daniel, who both dream of becoming software engineers. Ethan believes success comes from doing everything. He buys 10 online courses. He follows hundreds of programming channels. He reads every article he can find. He downloads countless coding resources. He constantly switches between learning web development, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, app development, blockchain, game development, and data science. Every day feels productive. Every day feels busy. But after 6 months, he still struggles to build even one complete project. Daniel chooses a different approach. Instead of trying to learn everything, he spends several days understanding which skills companies actually value for beginners. He notices that a small number of programming concepts appear repeatedly in interviews. Data structures, problem solving, programming fundamentals, building real projects, version control. Instead of dividing his attention across dozens of subjects, he commits himself to mastering these few essential skills. The first few weeks don't feel exciting. His progress seems slower than Ethan's. But month after month, something remarkable begins to happen. His understanding becomes deeper, his confidence grows, he starts building projects independently. Eventually, he clears interviews that Ethan still finds overwhelming. Both friends worked hard, but only one worked on the right things. This is the heart of the 80-20th principle. Success doesn't usually belong to the busiest person. It belongs to the person who identifies the few activities that create extraordinary results. Unfortunately, modern life encourages exactly the opposite. Our phones constantly compete for our attention. Every application wants another minute. Every notification claims to be urgent. Every headline promises information we simply can't afford to miss. Without realizing it, we become professional responders instead of intentional creators. We react to messages. We react to emails. We react to social media. We react to other people's priorities. Eventually, we forget to ask one simple question. What is truly important to me? Imagine your attention as a glass of clean water. Every distraction adds another drop of ink. One notification doesn't seem harmful. Neither does one unnecessary meeting, or 1 hour of mindless scrolling. But eventually, the water becomes so cloudy that you can no longer see clearly. The greatest cost of distraction isn't wasted time. It's lost clarity. And without clarity, even the hardest work often leads nowhere. One of the biggest myths about successful people is that they somehow possess unlimited discipline. But if you study highly successful individuals, you'll notice something different. Many of them don't actually make more decisions. They make fewer. They simplify their lives. They reduce unnecessary choices. They remove distractions before they become temptations. They create routines that naturally guide them toward their most important work. Imagine two writers. The first writer waits until inspiration arrives. Some days they write for hours. Other days they write nothing at all. Weeks pass with little progress. The second writer follows a simple habit. Every morning at exactly 8 o'clock, they sit at the same desk, open the same notebook, silence every distraction, and write for 90 minutes. Not because they always feel inspired, but because consistency eventually produces inspiration. A year later, one writer has scattered ideas. The other has completed an entire book. The difference wasn't talent, it was focus. Richard Koch reminds us that our lives are shaped far less by dramatic moments than by ordinary daily decisions. The problem is that these decisions rarely feel important while we're making them. Skipping one workout doesn't seem significant. Reading 10 pages instead of scrolling social media doesn't seem life-changing. Saving a small amount of money doesn't feel exciting. Practicing one new skill for 30 minutes appears almost insignificant. But life doesn't judge individual days. Life rewards consistency. Imagine planting a tiny seed. For weeks, almost nothing appears above the ground. You might even wonder whether anything is happening at all. Yet beneath the surface, roots are quietly growing stronger every single day. Then one morning, a small green shoot finally appears. From that moment onward, growth seems almost effortless. Success often follows the same pattern. The invisible work comes first. The visible rewards arrive later. Most people quit because they mistake slow progress for no progress. Those who understand the 80-20th principle remain patient. They know that a handful of meaningful actions repeated consistently will eventually outperform hundreds of random efforts. Another lesson from this principle is that saying yes too often quietly destroys your future. Every commitment costs something. Sometimes it costs time, sometimes energy, sometimes peace of mind. When you agree to everything, you leave no room for the work that truly matters. Imagine your day as a backpack. Every responsibility you accept becomes another item inside it. At first, the weight feels manageable. Then another commitment, another meeting, promise, another obligation. Soon you're carrying so much that even taking a single step forward feels exhausting. The solution isn't becoming stronger. The solution is carrying less. Highly effective people understand that every meaningful yes requires dozens of thoughtful no's. They aren't rude, they simply understand that attention is their most valuable resource. Once it's gone, they can never get it back. This idea becomes even more important when we begin looking at time itself. Most people treat every hour as if it has equal value. But that's rarely true. Think about your own day. There are certain hours when your mind feels clear, creative, and energetic. Then there are hours when even simple tasks seem difficult. The mistake is using your best hours on your least important work. Imagine spending your most focused morning answering routine emails, only to begin your most important project late in the evening when your mind is already exhausted. You're making success far harder than it needs to be. The people who achieve remarkable results don't necessarily have more time. They simply protect their best time for their best work. And that small adjustment creates an enormous difference over months and years. As Richard Koch reminds us throughout this book, the goal of life isn't to become busier. The goal is to become more effective, not by doing everything, but by discovering the few things that truly deserve your energy. Because once you identify those few things, something extraordinary begins to happen. Life becomes simpler, decisions become easier, stress begins to fade, progress becomes visible, and for the first time, you realize that success isn't hidden behind endless effort. It's hidden behind better choices. The question is no longer, how can I do more? The real question becomes, what is the small number of things that will change everything? That single question is where the real transformation begins. The moment you begin looking at life through the lens of the 80-20th principle, something unusual starts to happen. You realize that the world hasn't changed, but your perspective has. The same 24 hours, the same opportunities, the same people, and the same challenges suddenly look completely different. You begin to notice patterns that most people never see. Have you ever wondered why two people can start from almost the same place, yet 5 years later their lives are completely different? One seems to move steadily towards success while the other feels trapped in an endless cycle of hard work with little reward. The difference often isn't intelligence or talent. It's the quality of their decisions. Every day, your life is quietly shaped by thousands of choices. Most of them seem too small to matter. Choosing to wake up 30 minutes earlier. Reading a few pages of a good book instead of scrolling through your phone. Spending an hour learning a valuable skill instead of watching random videos. Calling your parents instead of endlessly refreshing social media. None of these decisions feels life-changing in the moment. But life is not built by moments. It is built by patterns. Imagine standing at the bottom of two roads that look almost identical. One road turns only 1 degree to the left, while the other turns 1 degree to the right. At first, the difference is impossible to notice. Walk 100 meters, and they still seem close. Walk a kilometer, and the gap becomes obvious. Travel hundreds of kilometers, and you end up in completely different destinations. Tiny choices work exactly the same way. Most people search for dramatic breakthroughs. They believe one lucky opportunity, one perfect business idea, or one magical habit will suddenly transform everything. But lasting success rarely arrives in a single moment. Instead, it grows through small, intelligent decisions repeated over and over again. Richard Koch reminds us that extraordinary results don't require extraordinary effort every single day. They require extraordinary consistency in the areas that matter most. Think about a professional musician. When people watch them perform on stage, the performance looks effortless. Every note flows perfectly. Every movement appears natural. It almost feels like talent alone is responsible for the brilliance. But what the audience never sees are the thousands of quiet hours spent practicing scales, correcting mistakes, repeating difficult sections, and improving tiny details. The performance is visible. The preparation is invisible. This is true for almost every meaningful achievement. People admire the successful entrepreneur but rarely notice the years spent solving problems before anyone knew their name. They admire the athlete without seeing the countless mornings spent training before sunrise. They admire the author without imagining the hundreds of pages that were rewritten before a single book reached the shelves. Success always hides its foundations. The 80-20th principle encourages us to stop chasing visible success and start investing in invisible progress. One of the biggest reasons people fail to make meaningful progress is because they constantly mistake urgency for importance. Your phone rings. It feels urgent. An email arrives. It feels urgent. Someone asks for a favor. It feels urgent. A new trend appears online. It feels urgent. But urgent doesn't always mean important. Imagine a doctor working in a busy hospital. Every patient deserves attention, but if several patients arrive at the same time, the doctor must quickly decide who needs immediate care. That decision isn't based on who speaks the loudest. It's based on what matters most. Your daily life requires the same kind of thinking. Not everything deserves your immediate attention. Learning to separate urgent tasks from truly important ones is one of the greatest skills you can develop. This is especially true in today's digital world. Technology has given us incredible opportunities, but it has also created endless distractions. Every platform competes for one thing: your attention. Because attention is valuable, companies spend billions designing applications that keep you scrolling just a little longer. Bright colors, endless recommendations, notifications, short videos, and constant updates all have one purpose: to make it difficult for you to stop. The danger isn't that these platforms exist. The danger is forgetting that every minute spent consuming is a minute not spent creating. Creators shape the future. Consumers simply watch it happen. Ask yourself a simple question. At the end of today, what will remain? The videos you watched, the posts you liked, the arguments you read, or the skill you practiced, the chapter you finished, the project you built, or the conversation that strengthened an important relationship. One creates temporary entertainment, the other creates permanent value. The people who consistently move forward understand this difference. They don't eliminate fun from their lives. They simply refuse to let entertainment replace purpose. Another important lesson from the 80-20 principle is that your environment quietly shapes your behavior far more than you realize. Imagine trying to eat healthy while your kitchen is filled with junk food. Imagine trying to study while your phone constantly lights up beside your notebook. Imagine trying to sleep well while your room is noisy and your screen stays on until midnight. In every situation, you're depending on willpower to overcome an environment that's working against you. Eventually, willpower gets tired. Instead of relying only on self-control, successful people design environments that make good decisions easier. If they want to read more, they keep books within easy reach. If they want fewer distractions, they silence unnecessary notifications. If they want to exercise regularly, they prepare everything in advance so there are fewer excuses. Small environmental changes often produce surprisingly large results because they reduce the effort required to make the right choice. Think about water flowing downhill. It naturally follows the easiest path. Human behavior often works the same way. Instead of forcing yourself to constantly fight bad habits, make good habits the easiest option. That is intelligent effort, and intelligent effort almost always beats exhausting effort. The same principle applies to learning. Many people believe that studying longer automatically means learning more. But have you ever spent hours reading a chapter only to realize you remembered almost nothing the next day? Now think about a time when a teacher explained one simple idea so clearly that you remembered it for years. The difference wasn't the amount of information. It was the quality of understanding. Learning isn't about collecting facts. It's about connecting ideas. The people who master a subject don't try to memorize everything. They identify the few concepts that explain many others. Once those foundations become strong, everything else becomes easier to understand. This is why experts often appear to learn faster than beginners. They aren't necessarily smarter. They simply know which knowledge matters most. As your understanding of the 80-20 principle grows, another surprising truth becomes clear. Perfection is often the enemy of progress. Many people delay starting because they want the perfect plan, the perfect equipment, the perfect timing, or the perfect opportunity. But perfection rarely arrives. Meanwhile, someone else begins with imperfect knowledge, makes mistakes, learns from experience, and gradually improves. Months later, the person who started imperfectly is far ahead of the person who spent all their time preparing. Progress creates confidence. Confidence creates momentum. Momentum creates remarkable results. That is why action will always teach you lessons that endless planning never can. The goal isn't to avoid mistakes. The goal is to make the right mistakes, the ones that teach you something valuable and move you closer to your destination. Richard Koch's message becomes clearer with every chapter. Your future doesn't depend on doing everything. It depends on identifying the few actions that consistently create the greatest value and giving those actions your best time, your best energy, and your full attention. Because once you discover your own vital few, life begins to feel less overwhelming. The noise becomes quieter, your priorities become clearer, and every day starts moving you a little closer to the person you've always wanted to become. The 80/20 principle doesn't simply change the way you manage your time, it changes the way you define success itself. Most people spend their lives chasing quantity. More money, more possessions, more followers, more certificates, more meetings, more opportunities, more commitments. They believe that if they keep adding more to their lives, success will naturally follow. But Richard Koch presents a completely different perspective. Real success isn't built by accumulating more. It's built by maximizing the value of what already matters. Imagine walking into a room filled with 1,000 keys. Somewhere in that room is a single key that unlocks the door to everything you've ever wanted. You could spend years trying every key one by one, or you could carefully observe, eliminate the obvious distractions, and focus your attention on finding the few keys most likely to work. Life presents us with the same challenge. Every day, hundreds of opportunities compete for our attention. Some promise quick rewards, others seem exciting simply because everyone else is doing them. But only a small number truly deserve our time and energy. The difficult part is that the most valuable opportunities rarely announce themselves. They often look ordinary. Reading one chapter of a great book doesn't feel extraordinary. Practicing a skill for an hour doesn't seem exciting. Saving a small amount of money each month appears insignificant. Spending uninterrupted time with your family rarely becomes headline news. Yet these ordinary actions quietly create extraordinary lives. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that every opportunity deserves equal attention. Imagine a gardener trying to water every single plant equally during a severe drought. Some plants are healthy, others are already dying. Some produce fruit, others produce nothing. If water is limited, treating every plant equally isn't kindness. It's poor judgment. A wise gardener first protects the plants that produce the greatest harvest. Only afterward does he worry about the rest. Your energy works exactly the same way. Every morning, you wake up with a limited amount of physical energy, mental focus, and emotional strength. Once these resources are spent, they're difficult to recover until the next day. That's why how you invest your energy matters far more than how much energy you have. Have you ever noticed that some days you accomplish more in 3 focused hours than you normally accomplish in an entire day? Nothing magical happened. Your energy was simply directed toward meaningful work instead of being scattered across dozens of small distractions. This is what psychologists often call deep work, the ability to concentrate fully on one meaningful task without interruption. Unfortunately, deep work has become increasingly rare. We're constantly interrupted. A message appears. We check it. Another notification arrives. We respond. Someone sends a meme. We smile. An email pops up. We read it. Without realizing it, our attention becomes fragmented into tiny pieces. Imagine trying to complete a 1,000-piece puzzle while someone removes 5 pieces every few minutes and scatters them around the room. Eventually, you spend more time searching than solving. This is exactly what constant distractions do to your mind. Every interruption forces your brain to restart. The cost isn't just a few lost seconds. It's the loss of momentum. Momentum is one of the most valuable forces in personal growth. Once you become deeply engaged in meaningful work, ideas begin connecting naturally. Solutions appear more easily. Creativity increases. Problems that once seemed impossible suddenly become manageable. But momentum is fragile. A single unnecessary interruption can break it. That's why highly successful people fiercely protect their periods of focused work. They understand that attention is their greatest competitive advantage. Richard Koch encourages us to ask an important question every single day. What activity, if completed today, would create the biggest positive difference in my future? Notice that the question isn't about urgency. It's about impact. Those two things are rarely the same. Imagine you're climbing a mountain. You can spend hours walking in circles around the base, constantly moving but never gaining height. Or you can choose the steep trail that requires more focus but actually leads toward the summit. Movement alone isn't progress. Direction matters far more. This lesson becomes especially important when thinking about money. Many people believe financial success comes from working longer hours. Sometimes that's true in the beginning. But lasting wealth usually comes from creating value, making wise decisions, and allowing your efforts to multiply over time. Imagine two friends. One earns a respectable salary but spends every rupee the moment it arrives. The other earns the same amount but consistently saves and invests a portion every month. At first, their lifestyles appear almost identical. 5 years later, the difference becomes noticeable. 10 years later, it's remarkable. The first person is still working only for today's income. The second person's money has quietly started working alongside them. Small financial decisions repeated consistently often produce far greater results than occasional dramatic ones. The same principle applies to learning. Many students believe that intelligence means learning everything quickly. In reality, intelligent learners ask better questions. Instead of asking, "What should I memorize?" they ask, "What ideas explain the greatest number of concepts?" Imagine trying to understand a massive tree. You could memorize every single leaf. Or you could study the roots. Once you understand the roots, the branches, leaves, flowers, and fruit begin making sense naturally. Knowledge works the same way. Strong foundations simplify everything built upon them. This is why masters in every field spend so much time refining the basics. Professional athletes still practice fundamental movements. Great musicians still practice scales. Experienced programmers constantly revisit core concepts. Because they understand that excellence grows from mastering fundamentals, not collecting endless information. Another area where the 80-20 principle creates remarkable change is relationships. Many people measure relationships by quantity. They believe having hundreds of acquaintances somehow makes life richer. But think back to the most meaningful conversations you've ever had. Were they with hundreds of people? Or with a handful of individuals who genuinely cared about you? Most of us can count those people on one hand. And that's enough. A few strong relationships often provide more happiness than hundreds of shallow connections. Imagine a campfire on a cold night. Trying to light 20 small fires usually leaves you with very little warmth. But focusing all your wood on one fire creates lasting heat. Relationships work much the same way. Depth matters more than number. Investing genuine attention into the people who truly matter creates emotional security that no number of casual acquaintances can replace. As you continue applying the 80-20 principle, something unexpected begins happening. Life starts feeling lighter, not because your responsibilities disappear, but because you've stopped carrying responsibilities that never belonged to you. You stopped trying to impress everyone. You stopped comparing yourself to every success story you see online. You stopped chasing opportunities simply because they're popular. Instead, you begin building a life based on your own priorities. And that's where genuine confidence begins. Because confidence isn't pretending to have all the answers. Confidence comes from knowing what deserves your attention, and having the courage to ignore everything else. The truth is that every remarkable achievement, every successful company, every meaningful relationship, and every fulfilling career is built upon the same invisible foundation: clarity. Once you know what truly matters, decisions become simpler. Distractions become easier to ignore. Your days become more intentional. And slowly, almost without noticing, your life begins moving in a direction that once seemed impossible. But understanding what matters is only half the journey. The next challenge is even more difficult. How do you protect your priorities in a world that constantly demands your attention? Because identifying your most valuable 20% is important. Learning to defend it is what ultimately changes your life. Success is rarely lost in a single dramatic mistake. More often, it slits away through hundreds of tiny compromises. One extra hour spent procrastinating. One unnecessary meeting accepted because it felt easier to say yes than no. One evening wasted on activities that added no value. One opportunity ignored because it looked too difficult. None of these choices seem dangerous on their own. But together, they quietly shape the direction of your life. Imagine a ship sailing across the ocean. If its captain changes the course by just 1 degree, nobody on board notices the difference immediately. The sea looks dead, the sky looks the same. Everything appears normal, but after weeks of sailing, that tiny change in direction can lead the ship to an entirely different continent. Your daily choices work exactly the same way. Every decision either moves you closer to the life you want or slightly farther away from it. Richard Koch encourages us to stop asking a question that most people ask every morning. What do I have to do? Today, instead, he suggests a far more powerful question. What few actions will create the biggest difference today? Notice how different those questions are. The first one creates a long to-do list. The second one creates a meaningful day. Most people judge their productivity by the number of tasks they complete. They proudly finish 20 small tasks before lunch. They answer every email, respond to every message, organize every folder, attend every meeting, cross dozens of items off their checklist. At the end of the day, they feel productive. But if you ask them what truly moved their life forward, many struggle to answer. Activity is easy. Progress is rare. Imagine trying to fill a bucket with water using 100 tiny drops every minute. Now imagine opening a strong stream of water directly into that same bucket. Both methods involve water, but one reaches the goal much faster. Focused effort creates powerful results. Scattered effort creates endless movement. This is why the 80-20th principle teaches us to measure our days differently. Instead of asking, "How much did I do?" ask yourself, "How much of what I did actually mattered?" That one habit alone can completely transform your productivity. Think about the people you admire most. Whether they're entrepreneurs, scientists, athletes, artists, or leaders, they all seem to possess one remarkable quality. They protect their focus. When they're working, they're truly working. When they're learning, they're completely present. When they're spending time with family, they aren't constantly checking their phones. They understand that divided attention produces divided results. Imagine trying to watch 3 different movies at the same time. No matter how hard you try, you'll never fully understand any of them. Your brain works in a similar way. Every time you switch between tasks, your attention pays a price. Researchers often refer to this as attention residue. Even after moving from one task to another, part of your mind remains attached to the previous activity. You may think you've completely shifted your focus, but your brain is still processing what you just left behind. Now imagine repeating that process 50 times a day. Checking messages, opening social media, returning to work, reading an email, going back to your project, answering another notification. Every switch leaves behind a small mental cost. By evening, your mind feels exhausted, not necessarily because you worked hard, but because your attention was constantly pulled in different directions. The solution isn't becoming mentally stronger. The solution is reducing unnecessary switching. 1 hour of uninterrupted concentration often produces more meaningful work than 4 hours filled with constant interruptions. That's why many successful people schedule blocks of uninterrupted time for their most valuable work. During those hours, notifications remain off, phones stay out of reach, emails wait, the outside world can pause. Because they understand that protecting attention is one of the highest return investments they can make. Another important lesson hidden within the 80-20th principle is learning to recognize opportunities that multiply your efforts. Imagine planting a single fruit tree. For years, it continues producing fruit without requiring you to start from the beginning each season. Now compare that to buying fruit every single day. One creates a lasting source. The other creates a temporary solution. Life offers similar opportunities. Learning a valuable skill is like planting a tree. Reading a great book is like planting a tree. Building strong relationships is like planting a tree. Creating systems that save time is like planting a tree. These actions continue rewarding you long after the initial effort has been made. Richard Koch reminds us that successful people often spend their energy creating assets rather than constantly solving the same problems. Think about someone who writes detailed notes while learning a new subject. Months later, those notes become a valuable resource. Years later, they still save time. Or imagine someone who develops an efficient morning routine. Instead of making dozens of decisions every morning, they already know exactly what to do. Their system eliminates unnecessary thinking, leaving more mental energy for meaningful work. Small systems often outperform great intentions. The same idea applies to decision making. Many people delay important decisions because they fear making the wrong choice. Ironically, that hesitation often becomes the biggest mistake. Imagine standing at the edge of a forest with 2 possible paths. One path looks familiar but leads nowhere new. The other disappears into unfamiliar territory. You hesitate because you're uncertain. Hours pass, then days. Eventually, someone else begins walking while you're still deciding. Progress belongs to those willing to move forward despite uncertainty. Waiting for perfect certainty usually means waiting forever. This doesn't mean making careless decisions. It means understanding that learning often happens after action, not before it. Every experience gives feedback. Every mistake teaches something valuable. Every success reveals what works. Without action, there is no feedback. Without feedback, there is no improvement. This creates another powerful realization. Failure itself is not the opposite of success. Repeatedly avoiding meaningful action is. The people who eventually achieve remarkable things are not those who never fail. They are the ones who fail intelligently, learn quickly, and improve continuously. Each setback becomes information rather than discouragement. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" they ask, "What is this experience teaching me?" That shift in thinking changes everything. Because every challenge contains useful information if you're willing to look for it. The 80-20 principle also changes the way we think about happiness. Many people postpone happiness until they achieve some future milestone. I'll be happy when I get promoted. I'll be happy when I earn more money. I'll be happy when I buy a bigger house. The problem is that every achievement creates another destination. The finish line keeps moving. Richard Koch encourages a different perspective. If only a few things truly create lasting happiness, then shouldn't those few things become part of your everyday life instead of remaining distant goals? Perhaps it's meaningful conversations. Perhaps it's spending time with family. Perhaps it's learning something new every day. Perhaps it's exercising, reading, creating, or helping others. Whatever those activities are, they deserve far more attention than the countless distractions competing for your time. Because a meaningful life isn't created during rare, extraordinary moments. It's created through ordinary days lived intentionally. Every sunrise offers another opportunity to choose what deserves your attention. Every decision becomes a vote for the person you're becoming. Little by little, day after day, those votes shape your future. And eventually, something remarkable happens. The life you once imagined stops feeling like a distant dream. It slowly becomes your reality. Not because you worked endlessly. Not because you chased every opportunity. But because you finally understood one simple truth. A few things matter immensely. Most things don't. And once you have the wisdom to recognize the difference, you gain something far more valuable than productivity. You gain control over the direction of your life. The journey, however, isn't complete yet. Understanding what matters is powerful. Protecting those priorities is even more important. Because the world will always compete for your attention. The question is whether you'll continue giving it away, or finally begin investing it where it can create the life you've always wanted. The greatest advantage of understanding the 80-20 principle isn't that you become more productive. It's that you finally stop living on autopilot. Think about how many decisions you make every single day without even realizing it. You wake up and instinctively reach for your phone. You eat whatever is most convenient. You respond to messages the moment they arrive. You say yes before you've even considered whether you actually have the time. You end the day feeling exhausted, but if someone asked you exactly what moved your life forward, the answer wouldn't come easily. The problem isn't that you're lazy. The problem is that you're living by default instead of by design. Richard Koch challenges us to become architects of our own lives rather than simply reacting to whatever happens around us. Imagine someone building a house without a blueprint. Every day they add another wall, another window, another room. Months later they realize nothing fits together. The doors don't align. The rooms serve no purpose. The entire structure has become complicated simply because there was never a clear plan. Surprisingly, many people live their lives this way. They choose careers because someone else recommended them. They spend money because advertisements convince them they need more. They pursue goals simply because society celebrates them. Years later they wonder why success doesn't feel satisfying. The answer is simple. They were building someone else's dream instead of their own. The 80-20 principle asks the question. What does success actually mean to you? Not to your family, not to your friends, not to social media, not to society, to you. Take a moment and imagine you're 90 years old, sitting quietly on your porch, looking back at your life. What memories would make you smile? Would you remember the hundreds of unnecessary meetings you attended? Would you remember replying to thousands of emails? Would you remember spending hours arguing with strangers on the internet? Probably not. You'll remember meaningful conversations. You'll remember the people you loved. You'll remember the skills you developed, the risks you took, the dreams you finally had the courage to chase. That perspective changes everything, because if those are the moments that matter in the end, shouldn't they matter today as well? One of the most valuable lessons in this book is understanding the difference between being efficient and being effective. Imagine climbing a ladder as quickly as possible. You're strong, you're determined, you never stop climbing. Finally, after years of effort, you reach the top. Only then do you realize the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. You were incredibly efficient, but you weren't effective. Many people live exactly this way. They become experts at doing things faster. They organize better. They multitask more. They answer emails more efficiently. But they never stop to ask whether those activities deserve their attention in the first place. Being efficient means doing things right. Being effective means doing the right things. And if you're doing the wrong things, becoming more efficient only helps you move in the wrong direction faster. That's why Richard Koch encourages us to regularly step back and evaluate our lives. Not every month, not every year, but as an ongoing habit. Imagine a pilot flying across the world. Even with advanced technology, the airplane doesn't travel in a perfectly straight line. Wind changes, weather changes, air pressure changes. Throughout the journey, the pilot constantly makes tiny adjustments. Without those corrections, the plane could miss its destination by hundreds of kilometers. Life works the same way. Your priorities today may not be your priorities 5 years from now. The goals that excited you at 20 might not inspire you at 40. The career that once fulfilled you might eventually leave you feeling empty. That's perfectly normal. The problem isn't changing direction. The problem is refusing to evaluate your direction at all. Every few weeks, ask yourself some honest questions. What activities gave me the most satisfaction? What work created the greatest results? Which habits improved my life? Which habits quietly stole my time? Who brings out the best version of me? Who constantly drains my energy? These questions aren't comfortable, but they're necessary, because awareness always comes before improvement. Another area where the 80-20 principle creates extraordinary change is confidence. Most people believe confidence comes after success. Richard Koch's ideas suggest something different. Confidence often comes from clarity. Imagine walking through a dense forest without a map. Every direction looks uncertain. Every choice creates anxiety. Now imagine someone hands you a detailed map showing exactly where you need to go. The forest hasn't changed. You haven't suddenly become stronger. But your confidence immediately increases because your uncertainty decreases. Clarity creates confidence. When you know what matters, making decisions becomes easier. You stop comparing yourself with everyone around you. You stop chasing every opportunity simply because it looks attractive. You stop worrying about missing out. Instead, you begin trusting your own direction. That trust becomes confidence. One of the most dangerous habits in modern life is comparison. Social media makes it seem as though everyone else is constantly succeeding. Someone starts a business. Someone buys a luxury car. Someone travels the world. Someone earns an impressive promotion. Someone shares another achievement. Without realizing it, we begin measuring our lives against carefully edited highlights from thousands of strangers. But comparison ignores one important truth. Everyone is playing a different game. Imagine comparing a marathon runner to an Olympic swimmer. Who is more successful? The question doesn't even make sense. They have different goals, different training, different challenges, different definitions of victory. Your life deserves the same understanding. Success isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming the best version of yourself. That means identifying your own 20%, your most valuable strengths, your most meaningful relationships, your highest impact work, your greatest opportunities for growth. Once you discover those, comparison begins losing its power. Because you're no longer running someone else's race. You're building your own path. Richard Koch also emphasizes that extraordinary results often come from courage rather than comfort. Most people stay busy because busyness feels safe. They're always occupied, always preparing, always planning, always waiting for the perfect opportunity. But meaningful growth usually begins where comfort ends. Imagine standing on the edge of a diving board. The longer you wait, the more difficult the jump feels. Your mind creates endless reasons to hesitate. What if I fail? What if I'm not ready? What if people judge me? Yet the moment you finally jump, you discover something surprising. The fear was often greater than the experience itself. Many opportunities in life work exactly this way. Starting a business, changing careers, writing your first book, learning a difficult skill, speaking in public, having an honest conversation. Taking the first step is almost always the hardest part. After that, momentum begins replacing fear. Another powerful lesson hidden inside the 80/20th principle is gratitude. When people constantly chase more, they rarely notice what they already have. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with valuable treasures but spending your entire journey looking only for what isn't inside it. Eventually, you forget how fortunate you already are. Gratitude doesn't eliminate ambition, it strengthens it. Because when you're grateful for today's opportunities, you stop making decisions from fear. You begin making them from confidence. Instead of constantly asking, "What am I missing?" you begin asking, "How can I make the best use of what I already have?" That single shift changes the way you approach work, relationships, money, learning, and life itself. As your understanding deepens, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. Time isn't your most limited resource. Attention is. Everyone receives the same 24 hours. But not everyone directs their attention with the same intention. Attention determines where your energy flows. Energy determines your actions. Actions determine your results. And results eventually become your life. That is why protecting your attention is one of the wisest investments you can ever make. Because every distraction costs more than a few minutes. It costs a piece of the future you could have been creating instead. The remarkable thing about the 80/20th principle is that it doesn't promise an easier life. It promises a more meaningful one. It teaches you to stop confusing effort with progress. To stop chasing everything. To stop trying to please everyone. Instead, it invites you to build a life around what truly matters. And once that becomes your habit, you'll discover something extraordinary. Success no longer feels like something you're endlessly chasing. It becomes the natural result of consistently focusing on the few things that make the biggest difference. The final lesson of this journey brings all of these ideas together into one simple philosophy. A philosophy capable of transforming not just the way you work, but the way you choose to live every single day. The greatest ideas are often the simplest. They don't require extraordinary intelligence to understand. They don't demand years of study before they begin changing your life. Their true power lies in one thing. The willingness to apply them consistently. That is exactly why the 80/20th principle has remained relevant for decades. It isn't just another productivity method. It isn't another business strategy. It isn't another motivational philosophy that sounds inspiring for a few days before fading away. It is a way of looking at the world. Once you understand it, you begin seeing it everywhere. You notice that a small number of books shape most of your thinking. A handful of conversations influence the direction of your life. A few decisions determine your career. A few habits shape your health. A few people bring most of your happiness. A few mistakes create most of your regrets. And perhaps most importantly, a few moments of courage have the power to completely rewrite your future. Imagine standing in front of a giant oak tree that has lived for hundreds of years. Its branches stretch in every direction. Its roots run deep beneath the earth. It provides shade to everyone who walks beneath it. Now imagine asking yourself how such an enormous tree began. Not as a giant, not as a towering symbol of strength, but as a tiny seed that someone could have easily ignored. Every remarkable life begins the same way. Not with one giant leap, but with one meaningful decision. One decision to start, one decision to continue, one decision to improve, one decision to focus. Over time, those small decisions become habits. Habits become character. Character shapes destiny. That is why Richard Koch reminds us that success is rarely accidental. It is usually the natural result of investing your energy where it matters most. As you finish this journey, there is one important realization worth remembering. The purpose of the 80/20th principle is not to make you work every minute of the day. In fact, it encourages the opposite. Many people believe success requires sacrificing happiness. They imagine that achievement always comes with endless stress, sleepless nights, and constant pressure. But what if that assumption is wrong? Imagine two entrepreneurs. The first spends 16 hours a day working. He answers every email, attends every meeting, personally handles every problem, and refuses to trust anyone else. His business grows, but his health suffers, his relationships weaken, his peace of mind slowly disappears. The second entrepreneur approaches life differently. She identifies the few responsibilities that truly require her attention. Everything else is simplified, delegated, automated, or removed completely. She spends more time thinking than reacting, more time creating than managing, more time living than simply surviving. Both achieve success, but only one enjoys the journey. The 80-20 principle reminds us that the purpose of success is not simply to accumulate more wealth or status. Love. Freedom to explore your interests. Freedom to learn continuously. Freedom to contribute something meaningful to the world. Because what is the value of success if you never have time to enjoy it? One of the greatest misconceptions about time management is believing that every hour should be filled with activity. In reality, some of your most valuable moments will be the quiet ones. The moments when you're thinking instead of reacting, reflecting instead of rushing, walking without checking your phone, reading without interruptions, sitting in silence long enough for new ideas to appear. Great ideas rarely arrive in noisy minds. They appear when the mind has room to think. This is why many successful people intentionally create space in their schedules. Not because they dislike working, but because they understand that creativity needs breathing room. Imagine trying to pour fresh water into a glass that is already overflowing. No matter how pure the water is, it has nowhere to go. Your mind works the same way. If every minute is filled with noise, information, and distractions, there is little space left for wisdom. Knowledge enters the mind. Wisdom grows in moments of reflection. That distinction changes everything. Another lesson hidden within the 80-20 principle is generosity. Many people assume that focusing on the most important things means becoming selfish. The opposite is true. When you stop wasting energy on trivial distractions, you gain more time for what truly matters. You become more present with your family. You listen more carefully to your friends. You mentor others. You help without feeling rushed. You contribute without feeling overwhelmed. Because your attention is no longer scattered across hundreds of meaningless commitments. It is invested where it creates lasting value. Imagine lighting a candle. One candle can light another without losing its own flame. Knowledge works exactly the same way. Every lesson you learn becomes more valuable when you share it. Every experience becomes more meaningful when it helps someone else avoid the same mistakes. Perhaps that is one of the greatest purposes of books. Every great author spends years discovering lessons that readers can understand in a matter of hours. Books compress decades of experience into a form that anyone willing to learn can access. Richard Koch has done exactly that with the 80-20 principle. He encourages us to question assumptions that most people never challenge. Do I really need to do everything? Does being busy actually mean I'm making progress? Am I spending my best energy on my best opportunities? Am I chasing goals that truly matter to me? Or am I simply following expectations created by everyone else? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are also transformative. Because every meaningful change begins with awareness. Before a gardener removes weeds, they must first recognize them. Before an architect designs a building, they need a clear blueprint. Before a traveler begins a journey, they must know their destination. The same is true for life. Clarity always comes before progress. As we reach the end of this journey, imagine yourself 1 year from today. There are two possible versions of you. The first continues living exactly as before. The same distractions, the same habits, the same excuses, the same endless busyness. Life isn't terrible, but it isn't moving in the direction you truly hoped for either. Now imagine the second version. This version doesn't become perfect overnight. Instead, they make one simple commitment. Every day, they identify the few actions that matter most. They protect their attention. They spend less time reacting and more time creating. They learn continuously. They invest in meaningful relationships. They say no to what doesn't matter so they can say yes to what truly does. At first, the difference between these two lives seems almost invisible. After 1 week, not much has changed. After 1 month, the progress is noticeable. After 1 year, the difference is extraordinary. Not because of luck, not because of talent, but because small, intelligent choices quietly accumulated into remarkable results. That is the true power of the 80/20th principle. It teaches us that extraordinary lives are rarely built through extraordinary effort. They are built through extraordinary focus. By identifying the few things that matter most and giving them your best time, your best energy, and your full attention. So as you close this chapter, don't try to change your entire life tomorrow. Instead, ask yourself one simple question. What is the one activity that, if I consistently focused on it, would create the greatest positive impact on my future? Find that answer, protect it, commit to it, and then repeat the process every single day. Because your future is not created by everything you do. It is created by the few things you choose to do consistently. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the 80/20th principle by Richard Koch. If you found these ideas valuable, and if this summary helped you see your time, your priorities, and your life from a completely new perspective, then be sure to subscribe to Volume and Vision. Here, we don't just summarize books, we explore ideas that have the power to transform the way you think, work, and live. If there's another life-changing book you'd like us to cover, let us know in the comments. We'd love to bring it to life for you. Until next time, remember this. Being busy is easy. Being effective is a choice. And the quality of your life will always be determined by the small number of things you choose to focus on every single day. Thank you for listening. Keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you in the next video.